Good afternoon. Through the media, there are reports coming out that the government might consider, or in all probability consider, bringing the communal violence bill in this forthcoming winter session of the Parliament. Two years ago, after a well thought out and much elaborately discussed in the National Advisory Council headed by Srimati Sonia Gandhi, this communal violence bill was being brought 2 years ago, as I said earlier. And even then, the BJP had objected to this very bill because we very clearly felt then, and now when the amended version is still not available in the public domain, but it has been sent to all the chief ministers as is being reported. We have not seen the amended version, but very clearly some parts of it have come out because chief ministers have started speaking about it, writing about it. So, we had objected to this bill then, and we objected to it even now. Because then the unamended version, the original version, and this now supposedly amended version which is coming through, which is already creating a lot of ripples among chief ministers, is clearly communal itself. The bill itself is communal. I am not sure its intention to help mitigate communal elements or problems of communal eruptions which might happen is well laid out. The bill smacks of prejudice and very clearly, which is not sustainable by law, but very clearly places into convenient two boxes of victim and the accused, even at the outset, by the virtue of one's birth into a particular religious community. A law which by birth makes a person a defendant being accused or a victim allegedly violated upon does not hold good at all. And that is the very reason why we think this communal violence bill, its intention itself is very communal. And therefore we reject it. We think it is discriminatory. We think it leaves a lot of things conveniently but not judiciously for interpretation. The ambiguity which it can bring about in inference, the definitional inconveniences with which people can misuse authority are all, this bill is full of it. And therefore we think such a bill, instead of bringing in communal harmony, instead of preventing violence, instead of hoping to bring in greater sense of fear among those wrongdoers, is only, even as it is being introduced, bringing in division in our politics, polarizing people. And for a Congress party which believes in polarization in political matters, seeks vote on polarization, seeks vote on appeasement, this is a tool with which they are coming to play their usual politics of communal appeasement. Vote bank politics, a kind of politics which keeps one section continuously under the fear of something else which doesn't exist. The Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu has written a letter probably yesterday highlighting the other concern which BJP has. that it goes against the very grain of our federal structure. Many of those powers on which this communal violence bill seeks to legislate upon are those powers which are by the Constitution given to the states. State subjects and those powers which are given to the state governments under the state subjects are the ones on which this communal violence bill tries to legislate upon. And therefore, state governments wonder, and we in the BJP also voice that feeling, as to won't it end up undermining the powers of states, undermining the powers of elected governments in the states. And in a federal structure, when elected governments in the states and their due constitutionally given powers are undermined, what are we doing to our federal structure itself? And therefore, BJP, also on the count of how this distorts or plays around with or affects the existing structure of federalism that prevails in India, the center-state relationship, the sharing of power between center and state, all these are likely to be adversely affected. And therefore, the BJP thinks that this law cannot, this proposed law, the bill cannot be passed in the parliament. It cannot, and we object to its being tabled. We will certainly stand up and voice our objection to this bill. We can go into greater details about what it is actually in its amended form once it comes out in the public domain, and when we can start, reading into it and then coming back and saying our opinion on it. But as things stand, the amended version, from the little trickles of information which is coming out, we find is no different from the earlier version, and therefore we wouldn't want to support it at all. That's about the communal violence bill, which this government, as per reports in the media, wants to bring in during this winter session. On the other issue, which has occupied public discourse between yesterday and today, about Article 370, post Sri Narendra Modi talking about it in Jammu rally, till the latest that we've heard Sri Omar Abdullah, the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, saying that Sri Modi has attempted to mislead the people of India, misinform them. I'm afraid I have to say here that after Sri Narendra Modi spoke about this topic and subsequently the threadbare discussion which is going on in our public domain, all very clearly, even as it is, without going into greater detail, even as it is, very clearly shows that it is the people of Jammu and Kashmir who, in the name of Article 370, have been denied benefits which are otherwise due to them, which are available for the people of this country other than Jammu and Kashmir. Even as it is, therefore, we can see how Article 370 has been misused by a small, privileged and influential section in Jammu and Kashmir to filter out all those progressive legislation from reaching Jammu and Kashmir. And here I take the example of the Delimitation Act of 2002, People's Representation Act of 1951. Then you talk about the various legislation post 73rd and 74th Amendment to the Panchayati Raj matter. So many different progressive legislations made in this country, and the Congress touts that it has been giving all the rights to information, right to education. Even those are not available. Right to Information Act has been tweaked at least 3 times by 3 successive chief ministers of Jammu and Kashmir. So if these kind of things are happening, denying the people of Jammu and Kashmir the due rights which are available for us? Is Act 370, is Article 370 really being used as the bridge about which we had several leading public figures talking about? Or is it being used as a filter to keep away progressive legislations reaching the people of Jammu and Kashmir? So if Shri Umar Abdullah now wants to tell us that Shri Narendra Modi is misleading the people, I think it's time up for the Congress and for the NC, National Conference, to tell the people of Jammu and Kashmir as to who actually is misleading in the name of Article 370. Who has denied the people of Jammu and Kashmir their rights to vote, their rights to, domicile, the rights which are entailed for every citizen belonging to a particular region to which they belong? The discrimination is against women. The discrimination is against SCs, against STs who don't even have a political representation which is reserved for them elsewhere, to the OBCs. All these are the discrimination which have set into the Jammu and Kashmir citizenry as a result of misusing Article 370. This is what has been highlighted post the mention by Shri Narendra Modi in his speech in Jammu. So it is now, I think, the turn of every politician of Jammu and Kashmir to say who actually is misleading the people of India, and particularly the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Why are you being denied? The people of Jammu and Kashmir, the citizens there, the citizens of India who reside, who are domiciled in Jammu and Kashmir, if they are denied equal rights as woman and man, as SCs for whom due reservations have to be given, who's the reason for it? Who's misusing Article 370 and denying them these rights? So, Mr. Abdullah, instead of pointing a finger at Shri Narendra Modi, who's wanting a discussion on it, on the denial of those rights which people of Jammu and Kashmir should also enjoy, the debate is on that. What has it been misused for? Instead of pointing a finger at somebody who's highlighting the problems which are emanating by misusing the article, I think it's time for the PDP, the National Conference, and particularly to the Chief Minister, who called that day in the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly when a regressive anti-woman legislation was being thrown out of the Legislative Council as a black day. And Mr. Umar Abdullah also threw out the Legislative Council chairperson, Mr. Dhar, because he didn't allow the bill to be passed. That bill, which is actually against the High Court judgment of 2002. The High Court judgment allowed women to have, even if they have married an outsider, a person of not a permanent residence of Jammu and Kashmir, that woman would not be denied inheritance as per the judgment. Whereas what has happened? Subsequently, you bring in a legislation, the PDP brought in a legislation for which the National Conference also supported. And when that got passed in the lower house, it went to the upper house, where because the chairperson did not allow the bill to be passed, National Conference's president and the current Chief Minister, Umar Abdullah, called it a black day and threw this person out of the party. I would like to ask Mr. Umar Abdullah, who is in favor of an anti-woman legislation? And who is using Article 370 to bring in such legislations which deny women their right, which deny STs and SCs and OBCs of their rights, which do not protect the panchayat members, which has denied the 73rd and 74th Amendment, which does not allow the Prevention of Corruption Act to be implemented in Jammu and Kashmir. So the denials will not help. Pointing at a finger who has raised these questions for public discourse will not help. As part of the ruling establishment, the Chief Minister is duty bound to answer people of Jammu and Kashmir as to why these denials have happened over the years. I think it's time for the National Conference, particularly to the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, to explain to his own people rather than point fingers at everybody who's raising these issues on legitimate grounds with examples which come out of Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you.